There we go. Now if I refresh this page, ta-da, you can see that that was the case. So Spring Boot security was doing the right thing. Now what I want to do is actually, so let me go ahead and comment this out for now, and let me open the project tab and let me go to template controller, and for now let me simply comment these two lines, restart, and then go back, refresh. So what I'm going to do is actually steal some code. So I'm going to go to inspect, and then right here I'm going to click on the root of this HTML, and then I'm going to copy the element. Now I can go back to IntelliJ. I can undo all of this, and let me go to configuration as well and do all of this. Now open up the login.html, and instead of this h1, let's go ahead and paste what we've copied, and let me indent all of this. So now let me go ahead and change a couple of things here. So right here the title will be, so Amigos Code, and then sign in, or actually let's simply say login instead. So login, and then right here, please log in to Amigos Code. And I think this is all for now. And obviously let's change this button from sign in to login. And now if I restart the server, and then go back, now if I restart this, you can see that we have a completely different login page. So actually let me go ahead and add some styling. So right here, so simply say style, and then inside let's go ahead and simply say body, and inside of the body, background, and then dash, and then color, and then this will be hash, and then 3e 3e 3e, and then semicolon, and then color, and then white. Restart the server. There we go. If I go back, and now if I refresh the page, you can see that we have this awesome login page. And let me put this full screen. And there we go. This is how you can have your custom login page. So obviously if I go ahead and try to use, for example, Linda, and then password 123 login, you can see that we are redirected to the login page. But the login page, so if I refresh this, or actually not the login page, so this is not the login page, so this is the actual index page. So right here, so if I reload this, you can see that I don't need any authentication because of this right here, so index. So we are being redirected to the incorrect page, and that's what we're going to fix next. Alright, let's go ahead and create a new view where upon someone logs in successfully, they go to that view. So go back to IntelliJ, and let's go ahead and open up template controller. Let's go ahead and duplicate this, and right here let's simply go ahead and say courses, and then courses, and then get, and then courses. Now let's go ahead and right here create a new file inside of templates, and then simply say courses. So make sure that courses is the same as this one right here, but with .html. So right here I'm going to keep it really simple, and then I'm going to say h1, and then courses, and then right here I'm going to say p, and then Spring Boot, and then security. There we go. Now go ahead and open up the application security config, and right here, so after we permit all to the / login, let's go ahead and say dot and then default success URL, and right here this will be / and then courses, and right here we're going to say true to force redirect. Now let me end this with semicolon, restart the server. There we go. Let me go back to Chrome. Now let me actually try and access / and then courses. Enter. You can see that we are redirected to login. Now let me try and log in. So Linda and then password 123, send, and there we go. You can see that now we are inside of courses and we have only one course, Spring Boot Security. So if you have any questions on this, go ahead and drop me a message. Next, let's go ahead and learn how to use the Remember Me feature. As I said previously, for any request that we send to our server, there is a validation on this session ID. So by default, this session ID expires in 30 minutes. So 30 minutes of inactivity. So just let me put this like this so you know exactly what's happening. So expires after 30 minutes of inactivity. So that session ID right here. So Spring Security offers the ability to extend this by using the Remember Me option. So let's go back to IntelliJ, and right here, so after default success URL, let's go ahead and say dot and then dot remember me. So right here, so this is the default, so defaults to 2 and then weeks. So let me end this with semicolon right here, and if I restart the server, there we go. Now if I go back to Chrome and refresh this, you can see that we have our login page here. Now let's go ahead and add a checkbox here so that the user can tick the box to remember a session for 2 weeks. So let's go back to IntelliJ, and right here where we have the login.html, scroll down and let's copy this, and right here, so this will be label for remember dash and then me, and grab this and then change the ID here and then name here and the placeholder. So actually it doesn't need a placeholder because it's a checkbox, so remove that, and right here simply say remember and then me question mark, and then the type will be checkbox, just like that. And finally, let's remove this required right here because it's not required. And if I restart the server, there we go. Now if I go back to the web browser and then refresh, you can see that we have the checkbox, but we haven't got the actual text. So let me go ahead and add that. So right here, let me simply say remember and then me. So I think we can get rid of this. So remember me, just like that, and restart the server, go back and then refresh, and there we go. So you can see that it's not pretty, but it does the thing. Now let's go ahead and simply say Linda and then password 123 and then tick the box, log in, and there we go. Now if I go to inspect, so I want you to see this, so let me go to inspect network, and what I'm going to do here is actually restart the server once more, and then refresh. Let's log in again. So Linda, password 123, and then remember me. And check this out. If I log in, you can see that we've sent a request. So log in, this was a post request. But if I scroll down, you can see that inside of the form data, we have username Linda, password 123, and then remember me on. There we go. So this is on. And if I didn't tick the box, it would have been off. So let me prove this to you. So log out. So /logout, and we will learn about logout next. So now let's go ahead and simply say Linda, password 123, and then don't tick the box, log in, and then this is the request. Scroll down, and you can see that we don't even have the remember me field. So there we go. This is how you use the remember me option. Next, let me go ahead and teach you exactly what is happening under the hood when you set the remember me option, and also how you're going to extend the token from 2 weeks to a custom time frame. All right, so let me go ahead and log out. And let me go ahead and log back in. So Linda, and then password 123, and I want to tick this box right here. So remember me. Then I'm going to log in. And if I go to log in, so you can see the network, and you can see that remember me is on right here. So what is happening under the hood is that if you go to cookies, you can see that we have a second cookie. So right here, so we have now this remember me cookie. So basically this is the exact same thing as the session. So remember right here, I said that we have the session ID, but we also now have the cookie for the remember me. And like the session ID, this cookie, right, so the remember me cookie is also stored in a database. So currently we're not persisting it to a real database, either Postgres or Redis, and Spring Boot Security is using an in-memory database, which means that if you restart the server, you will lose the remember me cookie. The same with the session ID. So the default, as I said, is 2 weeks, right? So right here, so let me actually add defaults to 2 weeks, and there we go. And I'm going to give you all of these diagrams so you can have it for reference. Now, the special thing about the remember me cookie is that it contains 2 things. It contains the username, also the expiration time, and finally it contains the MD5, well actually MD5 like that, and then hash of the above 2 values. All of this is managed, as I've said before, in the actual database, so in memory or Postgres or Redis. So I highly recommend that you use Postgres or Redis, because if the server restarts, you still have the information of whether the user has selected the remember me option and for how long. And finally, let's go ahead and override the default of 2 weeks to something greater. Now let me go back to IntelliJ, and right here, so with remember me, and if I put this bigger, we can customize it. So let me go ahead and simply say dot, and you can see that we have token validity seconds. So token validity seconds, but we also have this token repository, and this is, for example, if you are using your own database such as Postgres or MySQL or even Redis. So let's go ahead and configure the validity seconds, and this takes an integer. And what we're going to do is simply say time unit dot, and then right here days, and then dot 2 seconds. And let's go ahead and pretty much just say 21 days, right? So you can see that this returns a long, and we need to pass an integer. So I'm going to cast this just like that to an integer. And also, so if I put this on a new line just like that, and also we can say dot, and we can say key. So this is the key which is used to hash the contents, i.e. these contents right here. So the username and the expiration date. So that's the key used to generate this MD5. So usually this should be very secured. So let me go ahead and simply say something very secured. Obviously it's not secured, but you get the idea. So instead of using the default provided by Spring Security, I'm using this key and end this with semicolon, and there we go. So this is exactly how you extend your session with Remember Me. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Alright, so we've learned pretty much everything about form-based authentication. The last thing that we have to learn is how we're going to log out. So let me go ahead and log in as Linda, password 123, and then Remember Me. And let me just inspect. So let me make this just like that. And then network, let me send the request to log in. You can see that worked. And then log in, and you can see that we have the response cookies right here. So response cookies, and basically we have the JSession ID and the Remember ID. So you've seen that I previously, so when I wanted to log out, I simply changed the path to log and then out. Now if I press enter, you can see that I'm logged out. You can see that in the request. So this was the request. So right here in the request, we sent the JSON ID and Remember Me cookie, and then in the response we got nothing back. So basically Spring Security is clearing out the session ID as well as the Remember Me cookie. So we can customize the way this works, and let's go ahead and actually let me just close this here, and let me log in again. So Linda, password 123, Remember Me, login. There we go. So the way that we can change this behavior is the following. So let me go back to IntelliJ, and right here, let me go ahead and remove this semicolon, and then I'm going to say dot and then right here, simply say dot and then log out. And let's go ahead and customize this with dot, and then you can see that we have the logout URL. So in our case, this will be / and then logout. So basically that was the default, but let's go ahead and be more explicit so you can see what is happening. And what we want to do also is, so we're going to clear the authentication right here. So let's say true, and let's also go ahead and invalidate the actual session. So that will be true. And let's also go ahead and say dot, and then right here, so you can see that we can delete cookies. So let's go ahead and delete the cookies, and the cookies that we want are these ones. So if I go to inspect again, and then application, and you can see that we have the JSON ID right here. So let me just pass that there. And we also want to delete this one. So we want to delete both of those cookies. There we go. And finally, I'm going to say dot success, actually logout success URL, and I'm going to say dash, or actually / and then login. So basically, after you successfully log out, you can go to / login. Now let me go ahead and press semicolon and restart the server. There we go, up and running. if I collapse this and go back to Chrome right here, let's go ahead. And so let me actually make this smaller like this. And let me switch to the network tab. And if I restart this, or actually refresh, and then Lynda password 123, and then remember me. There we go. So I'm in. Now let me go ahead and trigger the log out from here and then send. And you can see that we are redirected back to the login page. And if you look at the cookies, so let me go to application, and then you can see that inside of cookies we have nothing. So let me show you again. So Lynda password 123 login. There we go. So you can see that we have the session ID as well as the remember me cookies. And if I log out, you can see that it's been deleted. So I just want to point out that you can see that the logout URL. So this, if I go to network, so this request right here, so the logout, so if you go to headers, this is a GET request. Now, you should be avoiding to use GET requests for logging out. So if I go to the actual documentation, so what they say in the logout documentation is that the URL triggers logout occurs when the default is logout. If CSRF protection is enabled, then the request must also be a post. This means that the post to /logout is required to trigger a logout. If the CSRF protection is disabled, then any HTTP method is allowed. It is considered best practice to use an HTTP post on any action that changes state, i.e. logout, to protect against CSRF attacks. If you really want to use an HTTP GET, you can use the logout request matcher. And this is basically, so if I copy this right here and go back to Chrome, or actually IntelliJ, my bad. So right here, so let me actually put it right next to this line here. So if I paste that and then say dot, and you can see that now I can say, and then log out. So /log out, and then remove that. So basically this is what is happening under the hood because we have disabled CSRF right here. But as I said, if you enable this, then you should delete this line right here, right? Because you want it to be a post. So this is just something to bear in mind, and you should be using a post instead of get to logout. But in my case, because I've disabled CSRF, I'm going to use a get. Now, if I restart the server, so I just want to show you that this works. And basically, if I didn't explain, so this logout request matcher simply means that whenever you go to this URL with this method, logout. So let me go back to Chrome and then refresh, and then Lynda password 123, and then log in, and you can see that we are in. If I look at the cookies that we have, only the session ID because I didn't take the remember me checkbox. And now if I log out, and you can see that the cookies went away and we are successfully logged out. And obviously you want to have a custom button. So Lynda password 123, and I might be getting tired of logging in and logging out. So login, oops. So Lynda password 123, and then login. So usually you would have like a button right here saying log out, and then you'd issue the request to /logout. So if you have any questions on this, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Let's quickly add a logout button in this page right here. So let me go back to IntelliJ and open up the project tab. And what I'm going to do is steal some code. So right here in the login.html, I'm going to grab this container right here. So this contains a form, and I'm going to go back to courses, and right here, I'm going to paste that. And then inside of this form, I'm going to say logout. Oh, actually, I don't even need this. So let me delete that. And basically all I need is the actual button. So this button right here that says log out. So let me actually show you full screen so you can see what I'm doing. So now this will be a get. And remember, so because I have CSRF disabled, this will be a get. And then right here, I'm going to say log and then out. Now, let me go ahead and actually remove this container right here. So I want it to be really simple. So indent this, and if I restart the server, there we go. Now, if I go back, refresh, and Linda password 123, remember me, log in. You can see that we have this logout button. If I click on it, and we are now logged out. So there we go. So this was very quick and straightforward. And obviously you want to customize that button and add some CSS styling so that it looks much better. Well, actually, I don't know why it wasn't looking like this one. So let's go ahead and correct that. So I think it was because, so actually we want obviously, so it's because it's not using the actual bootstrap right in the actual head. So let me go ahead quickly and take everything from here, right, and then go back, and inside let's go ahead and say HTML, and then paste that in. And right here you can see that we have the body section after the head. So right here, so go ahead and simply say body. There we go. And now we can paste everything inside. So just like that, and then format everything. If I restart the server, go back, and then Linda password 123, and then log in. There we go. You can see that we have courses, Spring Boot, security, and then I can log out. There we go. So you can see that now everything is matching. So actually, let me actually, I'm being really fussy here, but let's actually include the actual container right here. So container, and let's close that div. Let's put everything inside of this container, just like that. And right here, so this will be just a normal button. I don't want it to be large. Indent everything, and also the actual background color. So I'm going to remove everything. So actually the entire styling. There we go. So I think this will look much better. Let me go back last time, I promise. Linda password 123, login, and there we go. This looks much better. And you can see that I can go ahead and pretty much log out, and it works beautifully. So there we go. This is how you implement a logout button. All right, in this video, let me go ahead and quickly explain you something really important. So you see right here, if I go to the login.html, and if I collapse this, you can see that we have, so this name right here. So remember me. We also have the name for the password, and we also have the name for the username. So if you want to change this to a different value other than username, because this is a default, the same for password and the same for remember me, go ahead and open up the application security config, and right here in the actual form login, right? So in fact, let me go ahead and first indent things right here. So right here, I'm going to indent all of that, and I think it looks much better. So right here, what we're going to do is simply say dot and then password parameter, and this will be password, and then dot username parameter, and this will be username. And for remember me, right, so right here, remember me, I'm going to say dot and then parameter, or actually remember me parameter, and then remember dash me. So basically I'm just keeping it as the same as the ones that we have. But for example, if you wanted to change this to remember or actually password, you know, XYZ, you need to change the login right here to username XYZ. So I just wanted to show you that you can change this if you want, but I'm going to keep it as default because I kind of like it and I don't see any reason to change it. But I'm going to leave the password parameter, username parameter, as well as the remember me parameter, so you know that if you want to change them, this is how you do it. So there we go. This is pretty much everything you need to know about form-based authentication. If you have any questions for this entire section, go ahead and drop me a message and I'll be more than happy to assist. This is all for now. Join me in the next section. All right, let's go ahead and learn about database authentication. So currently we have 3 users, so Linda, Anna Smith, and Tom. And the way that we have created these 3 users was right here inside of our application security config. We did override this method right here, so user detail service, and then we created 3 users, so Anna Smith here, Linda here, and then Tom right here. And then you can see that we return the in-memory user detail manager. So this is actually in memory, but what you want to do is actually have this stored in a real database. So I'm going to give you the setup so that it's easy for you to connect to a real database if you need to do so. So we're going to change things around, and instead of using this in-memory database, we will actually have data coming from any data source. So what I want to show you first is if I click on user detail service right here. So this is an interface. So we're going to actually create a class that will override this interface in a second, but I want to show you this. So click on this eye right here so you can see the actual implementations, and check this out. You've got caching user detail service, in memory user details manager, so this is the one that we are using. You have JDBC DAO implementation already, so this is really awesome. So if I click on this class right here and check this out, you can see that you can use this class already with lots of SQL that will perform all the queries to fetch your users from your database. So select username password enable from users where username equals to something, and you can see the same with authorities and right here. So if I scroll down, you can see that this is the actual method that loads user by username, and you can see that it throws username not found exception. And if I scroll down, you can see that you have another one, so load users by username, and this returns a list of users. Load authorities for a username, load group authorities, create user details, set authorities by username query, and you have a bunch of other methods, even set role prefix. So this is really awesome. So if you want to use this class, you are free to do so. But usually this model will not always represent our own application, and you might want to change things around. But I just want to show you that this class is available if you want to use it. So next, let's go ahead and start changing things around to enable us to have these three users coming from a data source. So this data source could be Postgres, Mongo, anything. And I'm going to show you how to implement to an interface which will make things very easy. So this is all for now. Let's go ahead and get started next. All right, let's go ahead and start our journey implementing database authentication. So first, let's go ahead and open up IntelliJ. And right here, you see that we have this user, or actually these three users, and you can see that they are user details. So this user details is an interface, and it has a couple of methods. So get authorities, get password, username, is account non-expired, is account non-locked, is credential not non-expired, and is enabled. So basically, Spring Security uses these booleans, and if one of them is false, and by the way, I really don't like this name, so is account non-expired. It could have just been is account expired and then revert the actual boolean. But anyways, so if one of them is false, right? So is account enabled? So for example, if is not enabled, then you won't be able to access the application, right? You'll get a status code, which you'll get, for example, a 403 status code. So let's go ahead and create a class that will implement this interface. So open up the project tab, and let's go ahead and create a new package. And right here, let's simply call it auth. Let's go ahead and create a new class, and let's call it application, and then user. Enter. And right here, let's go ahead and say implements user details. Now we are getting an error because we have to override the actual methods. So I'll just press option and then enter, implement all of these methods. There we go. So what I'm going to do here is actually define a couple of final fields. So private final, and this will be a list, and this will be a list of granted authorities. Oh, actually, so let me actually follow this convention right here. So anything that extends granted authorities, and then I want to say granted authorities. So basically, I'm going to have everything that we have here as a field. So private final string password, the same for username, the same for is account. So right here, so let me actually grab that, private final, and this will be a boolean. And then just like that, let me grab is account not locked. Let me duplicate this twice, and that will be is account non-locked. And finally this one as well. And I think we have this one, so is credentials non-expired. There we go. And finally, if I duplicate this, we have is account enabled, or actually is enabled only. There we go. So now if I put this full screen so you can see properly, I'm going to add all of this to the constructor. There we go. And if I put this on a new line so you can see exactly everything properly, and there we go. So the final thing that we have to do here is you can see that these variables right here, they are unused. So granted authorities, password, username, is account non-expired, non-locked, credentials non-expired, and is enabled. So let's go ahead and scroll down, and right here let's go ahead and simply return granted authorities. This will be password, and right here will be username, right here will be expired, and right here will be logged, so non-logged, and then right here will be credentials, and finally is enabled. And if I scroll up, you can see that they are now all being used. So now that we have this class called application user, which implements user details, we can start creating our users based off this class instead of using the builder. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Alright, so I've just reshuffled the actual constructor, so you can see that the guarantor authorities comes third. So now let's go ahead and open up the project tab. And if I open up the application security config, you can see that we have this protected method user detail service. Now let's go ahead and create our own. And from that method, then we will have the ability to fetch any user from any database that we want. So right here, so from any database that we want. So basically what we want to do is, so in front of this, so if I just add this box right here, user detail and then service, and the job of this class right here is to pretty much just fetch stuff from our database. So let me just put this like that, and let me center it just like that. So this class will be responsible to fetch stuff from the database. Basically, this is following the N-tier architecture, and if you want to learn more about this architecture, go ahead and check my free YouTube videos, my courses, where I teach all of this. So now let me go back to IntelliJ, and let's go ahead and create a new class inside auth. And right here, go ahead and simply say application user and then service. So this guy will have one method that will have to come from, so I'm going to say implements user details service. There we go. And this only has one method, and that is to load by username. And it's that simple. So you can see that this throws a username not found right here. Go ahead and annotate this with @ and then service so that Spring initializes this class. Next, let's go ahead and define the interface that will give us the ability to load a user by username. So let's go ahead and create the actual interface that will give us the ability to load users from any data source. So let me open up the project tab, and right here inside of the auth, go ahead and create a new class, and this will be application user and then DAO, just like that. And this will be an interface. Now this interface will have one method for now, and that will be private, or actually public, my bad. And this will be an optional of, and then application user, and then I'm going to say select application user by username. There we go. And this will take a string and username. So if I put this full screen, you can see what I'm doing, and then end this with semicolon. And obviously, because it's an interface, I don't need this public keyword. Now let's go ahead and open up the project tab, and then go to application user service. And now let's go ahead and say private and then final application user and then DAO. And let's go ahead and add a constructor parameter. There we go. And now you can see that we can use this interface. So now let's go ahead and simply say application user DAO dot select by select application user by username, we're going to pass the username. So username, so this is the actual username. There we go. And then right here, I'm going to say dot, or else I'm going to throw. So I'm going to throw new, and then user name not found exception. And right here, let me just use string.format, and then user name %s not found, and then pass the username. There we go. So let me actually put this on a new line so you can see everything properly, and this also. So you can see that this service is now ready. Now, obviously, this is an interface, and we need a class that will have the real logic or the real implementation behind it. So that's why I'm using an interface, because we can use dependency injection to switch implementations if we want to do so. i.e., if you are using, for example, Postgres and you decide to use MongoDB, you don't have to change anything apart from one line of code. Let's go ahead next, create a class that will implement this application user DAO. All right, so before we implement the actual class that will implement this interface, let me show you what do we have so far. So currently we want to have these users in our database, right? And we have this user detail service, right? Which is this class right here. So application user service that implements user detail service. So then we created this application user DAO. So this is the actual interface. And now we are going to create a class that will extend this application user DAO. And actually the arrow should be this way, so upwards, right? And then this class will be responsible for managing the users in this database. Later, I'm going to show exactly why it's good to implement an interface, because you can then really switch implementation, i.e. you can switch this class with something else very easy. So let's go ahead and go back to IntelliJ. And if I open up the project tab, now inside of the auth folder, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this fake application user DAO and then service. And this will implement application user DAO, just like that. Now, if I implement the method, and it's only one, so you can see right here. So this is the method that we need. Now, again, let's go ahead and simplify things. So currently I'm going to use an in-memory data store as we did, but I'm going to show you exactly how you can switch to a real database. So inside of this class, what we want is to have these users right here. So remember these three users. So we want to have them inside of that class. So what I'm going to do actually is create a method. So let me go back, and right here I'm going to create a method. Oops, I didn't mean to close all of that. Just like that. And right here I'm going to have a method, and I'm going to say public, and then actually not public, so private, and then list. And this will be a list of application users. And let me simply say get, and then application users. And right here, let's go ahead and simply say list. And then this will be application user. Application users equals to lists, new array list. And inside, let's go ahead and create some users. And at the very end, I'm going to return application users, just like that. Now let's go ahead and say new application user, and inside we need to pass the username, so Anna Smith. The password, we need the password encoder, so private final password encoder. There we go. Now I'm going to add to constructor, and I'm also going to auto wire. So next, let's go ahead and say password encoder dot encode, and let's go ahead and simply say password. And next we need to pass the authorities. So Anna Smith, she's a student, so student, and then dot. So let's see if we can import this. There we go. Get, and then granted authorities, and then we need to pass a couple of booleans, and I think we have an error here. So this is actually a set, right? And if I open application user, so this is actually a list. So let me change this to a set. There we go. And also this to a set, and that fixes the problem. So if I go back, now you can see that the error went away, and now if I press Command P, I can pass the remaining booleans. So is account non-expired? So I want to say true because I want this to work. I don't want to block anyone. So is credential non-expired? True. And is enabled? True. There we go. And that's it. So now we have, so if I delete these lines right here, just like that, now we have Anna Smith right here. Let's go ahead and add a comma and then duplicate this about 2 times. And if I delete that, this will be Linda. And for now, I'm just going to keep password the same, right? So this will be the same. And then Linda, she is an admin. There we go. And the remaining will be the same because I want everything to work. And finally, we have Tom. So all lowercase, the same password. And then Tom is admin and then trainee. And there you go. So you can see that we have this method right here that gives me a list of application users. So obviously, you know, if this is coming from a real database, it wouldn't be like this, but I want to make things very simple for you to understand how security works, because the core of this course is security. So now here, what we're going to do is I'm going to say right here, so I'm going to say get application users dot and then stream and then dot filter. I'm going to filter, and then right here I've got the actually application and then user, and then what I'm going to do is simply say username dot and then equals to application user dot get username, and then right here dot and then find first. And you can see that this is everything we need for this class. So we have the password encoder so that we can encode passwords, and right here this method gives us 3 users, Anna Smith, Linda, and Tom, as we had previously. And then this method simply does a stream and then filters, and then it finds the first one. Otherwise, it will be an optional empty. So now what we need to do in this class right here is simply annotate this with @ and then repository. And right here, let's go ahead and simply give it a name. So fake. So this is the actual fake repository. And this is everything that we need to do for this class right here. All right, so let's go ahead and wire things up. Let me go back to IntelliJ, and right here, so I didn't explain this in the previous video, but essentially this @repository simply tells Spring that this class needs to be instantiated, and then this name right here is what you use when you auto wire in case you have more than one implementation, but I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So now let's go back to the application user service right here. And if I put this full screen, so right here, you see that we have this application user DAO, right? And we are injecting it inside of the constructor. So what we are missing here is at and then auto wire. So now Spring knows exactly that this interface right here has one implementation and is this one right here. So just to be clear enough, so right here, what we're going to do is simply say at and then qualifier. And the qualifier is fake. So we are literally saying that we are using the fake implementation right here. And I'm going to show you exactly how you would switch implementations. But for now, go ahead and simply say add fake. And if you don't have this, this will still work because you only have one implementation. But it's always good to add the qualifier in case you are planning to have more than one implementation. And there we go. So now that we have things wired up, let's go ahead and change the application security config right here. So instead of using this user detail service, to use our own one. And that's what we're going to do next. All right, so to replace this protected method right here, so this protected method that returns these three users, which uses an in-memory user details manager, right? So it's pretty much similar to what we're doing, but we are having full control of where the data is coming from. So to replace all of this with this class that we've just created, right? So actually we've just configured. So this application user service, right? So right here you can see that it implements the user detail service, right? And this returns user detail service. So what we want to do here is remove this method, or actually delete this method. So I'm going to delete it like that, and also delete the override. Now, the way that we configure things up is we have to create a bean. So add and then bean. And right here, this will be public and then DAO authentication provider. And let me simply name it as DAO authentication provider. And right here, what we're going to do is, so I'm going to create a DAO authentication provider. And let me simply name this as provider equals to new and then DAO authentication provider. Now, what we're going to do here is simply two things. We're going to say right here, we need to set the password encoder. So let me pass the password encoder that we have, right? And this line allows passwords to be decoded. Next, we need to say provider dot, and then check this out, set user details service. And the user details service that we want to set right here is, so what we need to do right here is simply say private final and then application user and then service. There we go. And I'm going to pass that inside of the constructor, add a new line here, expand this so you can see everything. So now if I scroll down right here, I can say application user and then service. There we go. So finally, what we need to do is simply return and then provider. Now there is one more thing that we have to do, and that is to actually configure. So we have to first override a method. So we have to override the configure method that takes the authentication manager builder. So I'm going to select that one. Okay. And right here, so instead of saying super.configure auth, what I'm going to do is simply say auth dot and then authentication provider. And right here, simply say DAO authentication provider. So this is the one that we've just implemented. And this is everything you need to do to use the custom class that we've created. So this application user service that implements user detail service. So this pretty much is the provider, and this is how you wire things up. So next, let's go ahead and test the application. So we've made quite a lot of changes. So we've added this entire package, but we haven't tested things. So next, let's go ahead and start the application and make sure that everything is working as expected. So we should really have no breaking changes with everything we have done in this section. All right, let's go ahead and test all of this logic that we added under the auth package. So really we are testing the database authentication, even though we're not fetching users from a real database just yet. So let's go ahead and restart the server. And while this is restarting, I'm going to go ahead and open up Chrome. And right here, if I refresh, you can see that we still get the login page fine. Now let's go ahead and simply log in with Linda. And remember, this time the password is simply password. So I'm going to type password, and then I'm going to take remember me. Now if I go ahead and try to log in, there we go. So you can see that it's working. And if I go to inspect and application right here, you can see that we have our cookies, so the J session ID as well as the remember me. So let me go ahead and log out, and let's go ahead and log in with Tom, and let's go ahead and log in with Tom, and Tom's password is password. Login. Now let's go ahead and, just for the sake of it, let's go ahead and try and access the API, and then v1/students/ and then 2, and you can see that is forbidden. Now let's go ahead and change this from management /API, and obviously it can get all of these students, right? Because it's using the management API, and Tom is an admin trainee. Now let's go ahead and go back, and let me log out. Let me now log in with Anna Smith, and then password remember me, and you can see also that the cookies went away since I've logged out. If I log in, you can see that we have new cookies, and right here, so Anna, she is a student. So let's first try to access management /API v1 and then students 4.3. That's fine as expected. If I change this from management to API / and then 3, you can see that we are getting Anna Smith. So there we go. So you can see that we've managed to implement the database authentication part. So we've implemented the user detail service, application user DAO, and then the actual service that implements this service, which is responsible for fetching students from any data source. And you can see that we have no breaking changes. So what I did actually, so if I go back to IntelliJ, so right here, so you see this DAO right here. So this interface will make it very easy if you want to switch from any database. So currently we have this class right here, fake application user DAO service, right, which has a list in memory, right? But then right here you can see that we have named it as fake. So if you want to have a different implementation, simply implement the same interface, give it a different name, and then right here where you inject it, you can simply target whatever implementation that you want. But I'm going to show you this later down the line. So this is all for this section. If you have any questions of what we've done here, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. So I just want to mention that you saw that we've got this interface, application user DAO, and this interface is very important for you. So currently we have the users in a list, right? But what you want to do is actually connect to a real database. So the reason why we've got an interface is because we can use dependency injection to switch between implementations just like that. So using the @qualifier, you can have your own implementations that stores users in a real database. And obviously that's what you want to go for, right? Because right now, if the server restarts, then we lose all of our users. Well, actually, not technically, but if you were to add someone else and then restart the server, you would lose that user. So if you want to learn more about database with Spring Boot, go ahead and check my full stack web development, where I teach how to connect to a Postgres database and how to manage schemas with Flyway. This is all for this section. If you've got any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. All right, in this section, let's go ahead and learn about JSON Web Tokens, or simply JWT, or some people also call it as JWT. So imagine that you have an authentication server, and then you have multiple different applications that want to access this server so that they can be authenticated to access other resources in your system. So let's say that you have an iOS application, an Android app, a web application, and it might even be like a third-party application, and all of them want to access your application. So as you saw throughout this course, we've used basic auth and form-based authentication. Now, if we were to use those two forms of authentication in this scenario, it will be very difficult because you need to have a common way for applications to access your server. So you can't really do that with basic authentication or form-based authentication because they are very different, and you might have, for example, the web application using form-based, and then you have the iOS using a basic auth, which I don't recommend, and the same with Android, and the same with third party. Now, this is when JSON Web Tokens come into play. So let me just quickly show you exactly what JSON Web Token offers. So the cool thing about JSON Web Tokens is that they are really, really fast. So they are fast because they are stateless. And I'm going to show you exactly what this means. But being stateless, it means that it doesn't need to have a database. But more important, the actual session of that current user. So with JSON Web Tokens, you don't have to store the session because everything is embedded in a token. And I'm going to show you exactly, how this really fits together. And also the cool thing about it is that you can use it across many services. So this is the example that I was giving you right at the beginning of this video. So, and some of the disadvantages of using JSON Web Tokens is that if the key is compromised, so the secret key is compromised, and I'm going to show you exactly what the secret key means and how it's used. But if it is compromised, then you are in real trouble. So also you have no visibility to logged in users, unlike form-based authentications. When the user logs in, when it logs out, you have the full history of your user. So with JWT you have no visibility, unlike you implement visibility on top of it. And finally, if the token is stolen, an hacker can pretend to be a real user in your system and pretty much steal and compromise users within your applications. So it is really used throughout the internet. I think you should really know how to use it, the benefits that it offers, and I do recommend it to use it because it's really fast, it's stateless, and you can use it across many services. So I really recommend you to use it if you have this last bit right here. So where you have multiple services accessing your application. If not, I would pretty much just use form-based authentication where you have only one application accessing your server. So the way that JSON Web Tokens work is like this. So it's very simple. So basically right here you have the client and you have the server. So the first thing that the client does is it sends the credentials, and usually this is the username and password. And then what the server does, the server validates those credentials and then it sends a token back to the client. Now, from this point onwards, the client will send a token for every subsequent request. So it doesn't have to send the username and password as it did initially right here where it sends the credentials, but it has to send only the actual token, and then the server validates the token, right? Whether the token is valid or, for example, if the token has expired. So right here, so you can see that, for example, if I send my credentials, I get token back, and then an hacker steals the token from my laptop, for example, that hacker can pretend to be me and steal my information. So this is something that you should be aware of, but this is pretty much how JWT works. So let me actually show you what it looks like. So let me go to this page, so jwt.io, and right here you can see that this is the actual token, right? So this is the encoded token. So you can see that it has 3 parts. So the first one is the header, and the header simply contains the algorithm and the token type. And then you have the actual payload right here. So this is the actual payload, right? And then you have the verify signature right here. So basically, so right here, you see that if, for example, I change this, so I add an S, you can see that this is invalid, right? And let me actually click on secret base64 encoded. And now you can see that I do get this base64 right here. And if you decode it, you can see what the secret is. So if this secret is stolen, then you are in big trouble. So there we go. So this is JWT in a nutshell. Next, let's go ahead and actually implement JSON Web Tokens with Spring Boot. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Alright, for this course, we're going to be using the Java JWT implementation. So go ahead and navigate to this repo, which you can find the link in the description of this video. And basically, this is the Java implementation right here of the JWT under the RFC specifications and open source under the terms of Apache 2.0 license. So this library right here gives us everything that we need in order to use JSON Web Tokens. So we can create keys, we can sign the actual tokens, we can verify tokens, and all sort of things. And right here you can see the table of contents is quite useful. So it explains what token is, and basically I highly recommend you that you navigate to this GitHub repo and read through so you understand exactly everything in detail about JWTs. So right here, let's go ahead and pretty much just skim through. So I want to show you exactly. So basically here you can find what a JSON Web Token is, but in essence a token looks like this right here, where you have the header, you have the body, and then you have the actual signature, right, which is the last part. And this is what I've showed you right here, right? So you have the actual header that contains the algorithm and the type, and then you have the payload, and then you have the verify signature. So if I scroll down, you see the installation process. So for Maven, this is all you need. For Gradle, the same. And right here you can see that this is how you generate a key. So this is how you generate a key, and then this is how you create a token right here. So this is a token, and you can see that the API is really straightforward. And right here you can see how you can pretty much just verify the actual token, and it's very simple. So you set the key, you pass the claims, you get the body, and then you pretty much just perform some equalities, right? But also I'm going to show you exactly how it works, but basically this is how it works, right? So if it falls under this catch, right? So let me put this full screen. If it falls under here, it means that you don't trust the actual token. And let's go ahead and actually install this library, right? And then start using it. So navigate to installation, and under Maven, let's go ahead and grab all of these dependencies. So we have the API, the implementation, and Jackson. So this relies on Jackson. So let's go ahead and grab this. So copy and go back to IntelliJ, and right here open the pom.xml and go ahead and under Guava paste everything. And let me add some spaces right there, and Maven is doing its thing, and there you go. So now that we have all the dependencies required to work with JWTs, next let's go ahead and start our journey implementing all of this. Catch me on the next one. See ya. Alright, so the first thing that we will do is verify the credentials sent by the client to our server. We're going to validate those credentials and then send the actual token back to the client. So we will generate a token and then send it to the client. So first, let's go ahead and implement this sends credentials part and then validate those credentials. So go ahead and open up IntelliJ, and let me close this pom.xml. Inside of the main package, go ahead and create another package and call this JWT. Now inside, go ahead and create a class and call this as JWT, username and password, and then authentication, and then filter. So this is a very long name, but it says what it does. So go ahead and press enter, and the job of this class is to verify the credentials. So Spring Security does it by default, but we can override this class ourselves and have our own implementation, and this is what we are going to do. So right here, go ahead and simply, let me put this full screen, say extends, and then user name, password, authentication, and then filter. Now inside, let's go ahead and override one method, and that is attempt authentication. So we will override this method that takes the request and response. Now the first thing that we want to do here is to grab the username and password sent by the client. So let's model that. So let's go ahead and pretty much just create a new class, and let's go ahead and simply say username and password authentication, and then request. And right here, let's go ahead and simply say private, and then string username, and then private string password. And right here, let's go ahead and pretty much just have an empty constructor. So constructor, and then select none. And let's have the getters and setters. So now let's go back to the filter that we've just created. And if I put this full screen, so right here, let's go ahead and simply say new, and then object, and then mapper. And right here, go ahead and simply say dot read, and then value. And the value that you want to read comes from the request dot get input stream. And we want to get the input stream into a username and password authentication request dot and then class. And now I can extract this to a variable, and you can see that we have the object mapper. And if I put this on a new line, so you can see exactly everything. So the object mapper reads the value from the input stream and then puts it into this username and password authentication request class that we've just created. Now you can see that we have an error, and this is because this throws an IO exception. So let's go ahead and simply say try, and then let me remove this line, put it here, indent things, and I'm going to say catch, and right here we will catch. So you can see that this class authentication exception, it's an abstract class that extends runtime exception. So let's go ahead and simply say IO exception, because this is what this get input stream throws. So E, and right here simply say throw new, and then runtime exception, and then pass E, just like that. So now that we have this request, right, we can authenticate to see whether the username and the password are correct. So for that, let's go ahead and use the authentication manager. So private final authentication manager, and let's add this to constructor. And for now, we're not going to auto wire, because I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to pass this authentication manager from our, so this class right here, application security config, later on. So let me expand this, and now let me go ahead and simply say authentication manager dot, and then you can see there is only one method, and that is to authenticate. Now this takes the authentication. Let me pass null, and I'm going to extract this to a variable, so the null bit, and this is the authentication. Now you can see that this authentication is an interface. So if I pretty much just see the implementations, you can see I've got a few, and the one that I'm interested is this username password authentication token. So let's go back, and right here, let's go ahead and simply say new username authentication password token, and inside we have to pass the principal and credentials. So the principal will be authentication request dot get username, and then the credential will be authentication request dot get and then password. So this is the principal, right? So the username is the principal, and the credentials is the password. So now we can simply pass to this authentication manager the authentication right here, and this authentication manager will make sure that the username exists, and if it exists, it will check whether the password is correct or not. And if that's the case, then this request will be authenticated. And finally, let's go ahead and return. So we're going to return this authenticate, and in fact, let me just extract this to a variable so you see the return type. So authentication, and then we simply return this variable right here, which means that we no longer need this final return. And there we go. So this is all for this part right here, where the client sends the credentials and then we validate those credentials. Next, let's go ahead and generate a token and send it to our client. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. All right, let's go ahead and generate a token and send it to the client. So open up IntelliJ, and right here, what we're going to do is override yet another method. So the method that we will override is, if I press Command and then O, is successful and then authentication, this one right here. So this method right here will be invoked. So if I put this on a new line, just like that. So this method will be invoked after the attempt authentication is successful. So if this fails, this will never be executed. And what we want to do inside of this method is to create a token, so a JWT token, and send it to our client. So the way that we are going to do it is very simple. So let's go ahead and use the library. So Java JWT. So simply say J capital and then W and then T's. So IO JSON web token. And right here, go ahead and simply say dot and then builder. So what we're going to do here is simply add few things. So remember right here, so the actual token, so this is how the token looks like. So we need the actual payload. So this is the payload. Then we can specify the header, and then this signature, we have to sign the token. So let's go ahead and first set the actual subject. So dot and then set and then subject, and the subject will be auth result dot and then get the name. So we are getting the name of the authentication result. So let me actually go back, and you can see that we have a few other things. So we have credentials, we have the principal is authenticated, but what I want is the actual name. So this will be Linda or Tom or Anna Smith in our case, right? So those are the current users that we have in our system. Next, let's go ahead and set the actual body. So this body right here, so this body, and the way that we specify this body right here is by using claims. So claims and body is pretty much the same thing. So claims, or actually claim. So let's use this very first one, and right here, let's simply go ahead and say authorities, and then comma, and then auth result dot, and then we can get the actual authorities just like that. And now let's go ahead and say that this was issued at, so this was actually now, so new and then date. And we can also set the expiration, so expiration, go ahead and simply say date, and make sure you pick the date from SQL dot and then value of, and then let's go ahead and simply say local and then date dot now and then plus. So you can say plus day, plus months, plus weeks, but let's say that this token expires in 2 weeks. just like that. And obviously all of this can be configurable, right? But we're going to do that later. But finally, let's go ahead and pretty much just sign. So we want to sign this token, which is this last bit right here. So the way that you do it with this library is simply say dot sign and then with. And the way that we generate the key is as follows. So simply say keys and then dot and then HMAC SHA key 4. And then right here, I'm going to say secure. So make sure that this is actually long enough, right? So you should be generating, these really strong keys so that no one can guess. So it has to be really, really secure. So also it has to be long, right? So let me actually duplicate this secure, and I'm going to paste it a couple of times, just like that, secure. And at the end, I'm going to say dot and then get, or actually get bytes, just like that. So go ahead and make sure that this, so let me actually extract this to a variable. So key, just like that. And then we say key and then get bytes. And finally, what we need to do is simply say dot and then compact. There we go. And now I can extract this to a variable, and this is the actual token. And the final thing that we have to do, so let me go back to this diagram. So we have a token, so we've generated a token. Now we need to send the token to the client. And the way that we will do it is simply by adding the token to the response header. So right here, you can see that we have access to the response. So go ahead and simply say response dot and then add header, and then right here simply say authorization, and then simply pass the actual token. But we're not just going to pass the token like that, because remember with basic auth we said basic, and then the username and password were in base 64. So it's pretty much almost the same with JWTs, but instead we will say bearer and then space plus and then the actual token. And this is pretty much everything we need in order to send the token. Let me add some spaces here so you can see properly. So this is pretty much everything that we need in order to add the token to the response, and that way the client can retrieve it and use it for subsequent requests. So currently we've implemented this part right here, so send credentials and validate credentials, and also sending the actual token. Next, let's go ahead and test what we have implemented so far. Alright, so it's time for us to wire things up, but before we move on, let me quickly explain request filters. So they are very, very simple. So right here you see that we have a request, and this request needs to reach a destination, and in this case is the actual API. So what request filters are simply classes that perform some kind of validation before reaching the final destination. So in this case, API. So in this example, you can see that you have the initial request, and the request goes through this first filter, and then it goes through the second filter, the third filter, and this should be 4 right here. So the 4 filter, and you can pretty much have as many filters that you want. And also the order of these filters is not necessarily guaranteed. So currently we have this filter right here. So JWT username and password authentication filter, which is this class right here. So we extended this username and password authentication filter. So by default, Spring Security gives us this implementation. And what we've just done was we did override this class and implemented the attempt authentication as well as the successful authentication. Because right here we needed to attach the bearer token, i.e. the JWT token. So filters are pretty much classes that allow you to perform some validation on your requests, and you can either proceed to the next filter or reject the request. So now that you know what filters are, let's go ahead and configure our very first filter. So let's go ahead and configure this JWT username and password authentication filter. So go ahead and open up IntelliJ, and I'm going to open the project tab and go ahead and open up the security package, and inside open up the application security config. Now inside, scroll down and you can see that right here we have a few things going on. So previously we were using form based authentication right here with some extension of the sessions right here. But to be honest, now we are about to switch to JWTs. We no longer need all of this. So what I'm going to do is delete. So I'm going to delete all of this. So the form login, the same with remember me, and log out. So delete everything just like that. And you can see that this is now much simpler. So right here, what I'm going to do is before authorize requests, let's go ahead here and simply say dot and then add and then filter. So this is how you add a filter. And the filter that we want to add is new and then JWT username and password authentication filter. And this filter right here takes the authentication manager. Now the way that we get access to authentication manager is simply by saying authentication and then manager, just like that. And basically we have access to this authentication manager because we are extending web security configure adapter. So if I open up that class and then press shift command F12, and right here you can see that we have the authentication manager. So you can see that it's a protected method, and this method allows us to authenticate our users. So let me close this class, and there we go. So there is one more thing that we have to do, and that is remember that I said that. So if I go here, so remember I said that JSON Web Token is stateless. So let's go ahead and make sure that we are using a stateless authentication. So go back to IntelliJ, and before adding the filter, go ahead and say dot and then session management, and then simply say dot session creation policy, and then simply say session creation policy and then stateless. And then right here, let's go ahead and say and this is pretty much how you configure the session management. So now the session won't be stored in a database as it was previously. And this, so let me actually put this on a new line, and there we go. So this is everything we need to do to change our configure method inside of application security config. Next, let's go ahead and test that we can authenticate users, and also that we can generate a token and attach it to the response for our clients. Alright, so to test all of this, first let's go ahead and add some breakpoints. So I'm going to go ahead and add a breakpoint right here. So right here, and then scroll down, And also let's add a breakpoint right here. So after we generate the token. So now that we have these breakpoints, let's go ahead and start the application in debug mode. So press on the debug icon right here, or actually the bug icon. There we go. So the application is up and running. Now let me go ahead and open up Postman, and let's issue our first request using JWTs. So this will be a post, and will be a post to local host 8080 and then login. And then for the body, instead of form data, change it to raw, and then from text to application.json, or actually just application/JSON. Now let's go ahead and pass username, and remember we have Linda, and I need a comma there, and then the password. So password is simply password. So let me just show you in case you've forgotten. So right here, if I open up auth, fake application user DAO, you can see that we have, so right here, get application users, we have Anna Smith, and the password is password. We have Linda, and the password is password. And we also have Tom that has the same password. So let me go back to Postman, and now I can go ahead and send this request, and you can see that this has stopped on line 42. So it means that pretty much everything went fine. So let's have a look at this username and password authentication request. So if I open it up, put it in the middle, you can see that we have the username Linda and password is password. And then we have this authentication. Let's look at it as well. So the principal is Linda, credentials is password, and authorities is empty because we haven't provided one. And to be honest, we didn't have to, right? Because the user wasn't authenticated. And you can see that authenticated equals to false. And then right here, we use the authentication manager to authenticate. So let's have a look at the authenticate variable. And right here, you can see that we have the principal. So this is Linda. The password is hashed, and then granted authorities. You can see that Linda, she has student write, read, course read and write, and the role is admin. And you can see that is account non-expired, non-locked, actually credentials non-expired, and is enabled. They're all true, so good news. And if I collapse this, you can see that authenticated is now true, which means that it was a success. So now let's go ahead and resume this. You can pretty much press F9 or on this play button, and there we go. So we have stopped here for some reason. I don't know why, but let's go ahead and try to step over again, and there we go. So I didn't have any breakpoint here, but it stopped here. That was weird. But right now you can see that we've managed to generate a token. So if we have a look, you can see that this is a long token, right? So it's a long token, and this was the key that we have used right here. So we said get bytes, and if this fails for you for any reason, is because the key, right, this key is really sure. So make sure that it's quite big. And finally, now what we're going to do is say response.add header authorization and then bearer and then the actual token. Now let's go ahead and simply play. There we go. Let's go back to Postman, and let's go ahead and have a look at the headers. And look at this. We now have the bearer and then the actual token. Now what I'm going to do is actually grab this token, and to be honest, everything is working as expected. So this is really awesome. So grab the token and go to the jwt.io, and let's actually paste our token here. So paste the token there, and look at this. So let me actually take on secret base 64 encoded, and then untick. So for some reason you have to tick this, and you can see that the signature is verified. But now have a look. So we have our token, which is quite big, and look at this. The algorithm is HS512, and then the subject is Linda, right? So this is Linda, that's the username. And then we have the authorities. So student write, read, course read, and then course write. And then we have the admin, and then we have the expiration and issued at. And this is really awesome. And you can see that it will expire 15th of December. So we said 2 weeks, and you can see the date. So this is the 1st of December, and this is within 2 weeks. This token will expire, and then the user has to provide the credentials again to be issued a new token. So there you go. We've managed to actually, let me show you the diagram. So we've managed to implement these first 2 steps. So if you have any questions of what we've done, go ahead and drop me a message. But next, let's go ahead and use the token that we have, right? And then have the server validate it. And if everything is fine, the client should be able to access the requested resource or the requested API. So this is all for now. Let's move on to implement this final part right here. All right, so let's go ahead and focus on this part right here, where the client now will send a token for every single request, and then the server will validate whether the token is still valid. So for that, what we're going to do is create another filter. So right here, remember the filters diagram that I've showed you. So now we will have a second filter, and this will be called JWT token verifier. And the job of this filter is simply to check whether the token is valid or not. If it's valid, then we allow the client to access the API or whatever resource he wants. Otherwise, we will throw an exception. So let's go ahead and open up IntelliJ, and inside of the JWT package, go ahead and create a new class, and this will be JWT and then verifier. Or actually, let's go ahead and simply say, I think was token verifier. So token. So right here, token. Just like that. And this will be extends and then once per request filter. So basically this filter right here so has one method. And the reason why I'm having once per request filter is because I really just want this filter to be executed once per request. So sometimes filters can be invoked more than once. So this simply says that please do invoke this filter just once for every single request coming from the client. So the very first thing that we have to do here is to actually get the token from the header. So when the client submits the request, the client will send the token along. So the way that we get it is simply by saying string and then authorization header equals to, and then we're going to rename this to request and then response, just like that. And right here, what we're going to say is simply request dot and then get header. And the header that we're going to get is the authorization, just like that. And now what I'm going to do is the follow. So I'm going to say if, and then strings, and make sure that you pick the one from com.google.common.base dot, and then is null or empty. And then I'm going to pass the authorization header. If that's the case, or the authorization header dot starts with, and remember this starts with bearer and then space. So let me just flip this around. So if is null or empty, or it doesn't start with bearer and then space, we have a problem here, right? So what we're going to do is simply say filter chain, and then do filter, and then pass the initial request. And also we have to pass the response, and right here simply return. So basically at this point, when this is true, i.e. if it falls under this branch right here, the request will be rejected, right? Because there is no way for us to authenticate the actual request. So if that's not the case, what we're going to do is the follow. So I'm going to have a try block right here, and right here we're going to say string, and then we're going to get the token. So token coming from the client equals to authorization header dot replace, and then we're going to replace the authorization header with bearer and then space, and we're going to replace that with an empty string. And actually I don't have to pass the authorization header right here, because I'm calling the method on the actual string itself. So there we go. So now, so what's going to happen is, so if I show you exactly, so remember this is the token. So this is the token, but the client will send bearer just like that, and then space. Oops, just one R and then space, right? And then basically we want to grab the token itself without bearer, right? So let me just undo that, and there we go. So now we have a token. Now what we're going to do here is, first we're going to say J and then WTs and then dot, and then we're going to invoke the parser method. So this will allow us to parse the actual token. And then right here we need to set the sign-in key, and I'm going to pass this in a second. And then right here we need to say dot and then parse and then claims JWS. So go ahead and simply say JWS, and I'm going to show you exactly why is this JWS. So if I go to the docs, so right here on the quick start, you can see that right here when we call the compact at the end, results, so right here, compacting into the final string form, a signed JWT is called a JWS. So basically we want to get it back, and there we go. So right here, the actual key, so we need to get the key. So the way that we're going to get the key for now is, let's go back to our previous filter, and let's grab this, go back, and then paste it in. So this is the actual secret, and then key, and we're going to refactor this in a second. But then let's also go back and let's grab this line right here, so keys, and then we say key dot get bytes. So the same thing here, and then pass that in, and this will be secret key. And there we go. So if I put this full screen so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now I can go ahead and extract this into a variable, and this is simply called claims JWS. So now from this claims JWS, we're going to get a few things. So first, what we're going to get is the actual body. So let's simply go ahead and say claims dot and then get and then body, right? You can also get the header, but for now we don't need the actual header. So now we get the body, and from the actual body we're going to retrieve the subject. So get and then subject. Or actually, let me show you what we have. So basically at this point we can get pretty much everything. So issue that, we can even change the actual expiration date, you can see that we can get the issuer and basically other methods that we can perform on the actual body. So right here, let's go ahead and simply say get and then subject. So we want to get the actual subject, and remember the subject is this. So this is the actual subject, which is Linda. So right here, let's go ahead and extract this to a variable and then simply say user and then name. So now we also want to get the actual, so right here, the authorities from the body, and the authorities is a list of maps. So you can see here, a list of maps that contains the actual authorities. So let's go ahead and right here, simply say body dot and then get, and right here what we're going to get is the authorities. And basically if I go back to the previous filter, so right here, remember when we added a claim to the body, so right here authorities, we are simply getting it back. So right here, and this contains a list, and this is a map of strings, just like that. And I'm going to import list, and I need to first cast this like so. And then right here, so what I'm going to do is simply say var, because I don't want to type this long casting right here. So let's go ahead and simply say authorities, just like that, and then equals. So now that we have the authorities, we can go ahead and tell Spring Security that from this point onwards, this user can be authenticated, because from this point, everything is fine. So what we're going to do is simply say security context holder, and then dot, we're going to get the context. And then right here, we need to set the authentication. And for now, let's go ahead and simply pass null and extract this to a variable. And you've seen this before. So right here, let's go ahead and simply say new, and then username password authentication token. And right here, guess what? The actual principal will be the username. The credentials, we can pass null, right? And then right here, the actual authorities, we need to pass authorities. So actually, so this is not going to work. So what we're going to do here is simply map this authorities, because this one expects it, because this one needs to be a collection that extends granted authority. So right here, what we're going to do is simply say authorities dot and then stream. And right here, we're going to say dot and then map. And then this will be the actual map. And I'm going to say m dot and then get. And then the actual key will be right here. So this is the actual key. So this is the list. We are mapping the list. And then for each item, we are mapping, or actually getting the authority, so that we can map it into this student right. So right here, let's go ahead and simply say authority. So make sure that this is the same as this one. And what I'm going to do is actually take this and then say new simple granted authority, and then pass that, and then dot collect this to set, extract this to a variable, and then let me simply say simple and then granted authorities. There we go. So now instead of authorities, simple granted authorities, and there you go. So you can see that we have no errors. So right here, we are getting this authentication, and then setting the user, or actually setting the authentication to be true, right? So at this point, we can say that the client that sent the token is now authenticated, and this is what this line does. Now, right here, we have to, so if I scroll up, you see that we have a try block. So now we need to catch any exceptions. So catch, and right here, let's go ahead and catch the JWT and then exception. So basically right here, I'm going to say throw and then new illegal state exception, and then simply say token cannot be trusted. So if I do a string format here, so string dot format, and then close that, and then %s, and then right here simply say comma, and then pass the actual token. So what was it? Yeah, it was token, but I think I need to pull this out of the try. So right here, and then I can use it down here. So token, just like that. So there we go. So if we fail to validate the token, right, with this try block, the token is not valid, and therefore we do not trust the token. So the token maybe has been modified or expired. So this exception will tell us exactly what the problem is. So there we go. So we've actually done quite a lot here. And if you have any questions about what we've done here, go ahead and drop me a message. But next, I'm going to debug this step by step so you see everything in action. Alright, so before we actually test all of this, what we need to do is to register this filter. So let's go ahead and open up the project tab, and I'm going to open up the application security config. And right here, what I'm going to do is the follow. So I'm going to say dot and then add filter after, and then the actual filter is new and then JWT verifier. And then we're going to add the filter after this one right here. So this one right here. So JWT, and then username and password, authentication filter, dot, and then class. And there we go. So now we have registered this filter after the username and password authentication filter. So right here. So this is what we are doing. So we are registering this filter after this one right here. So now let's go ahead and go back, and what we're going to do is add a breakpoint right here. So we have a breakpoint, and then we're going to step over. Now what I'm going to do is start the application in debug mode. There we go, up and running, no errors. And if I open a Postman, so right here, remember before, so we tried to log in and we got a token back. So I don't even need to log in at this point because the token will expire in 15 days. So what we need to do is grab the token, and let's go ahead and open up a new tab, and let's issue a GET request. And this will be to management API right here. And then inside of headers, let's go ahead and say authorization header, and then paste the actual bearer token, just like that. And we are good to go. Now I'm going to send the request. And you can see that we have hit the actual breakpoint. Now let's step over this so you see everything in action. So I want to step over here, and you can see that this is the actual token. So bearer and then the long token. Now we shouldn't fall into this if statement because the token is fine. And right here, I'm going to step over, and you can see that we've removed the bearer and then the space, and we have only the actual token. That's fine. So let's actually now step over, and let's try and parse the actual token. And you can see that worked. So inside of this claims JWS, so let's have a look. So you can see the actual header. So the header contains the algorithm, the body contains the subject, so Linda, and then authorities, right? So this is the actual list that I said, right? And that contains all of these maps. So if I collapse that, and we also have the issued at and expiration, right? As well as the actual signature. So let's go ahead and step over and then grab the username right here from the subject. You can see Linda right here. So Linda. And then the authorities. So you can see that this indeed is an array list of linked hash maps. And we're going to map this to a simple granted authority set. There we go. Now, if I show you the actual set, you can see that we have 5 elements in it. Now, let's construct the authentication. There we go. Authentication, Linda, credentials null, authorities, and right here, authenticated now is, well, actually is about to be true, right? Because of this line right here. So set authentication. So if I continue, there we go. And there we go. So you can see that we have a 200 status code. And to be honest, in the actual body, we are not getting the JSON payload that we are expecting, which is a list of students. So I think I know what is happening. Let me explain it really quickly. So if I open up the diagram for the request filters, so basically, so the filters, the way they work is they receive the request and response. So right here. So if I scroll up, you can see that we have the request and response. And then what they do is once they are done with whatever logic they have to perform, they need to pass the request and response onto the next filter, just like that. So just let me finish this quickly. So you see exactly how filters work. So basically they pass from one filter to the other until it reaches the actual destination, which is the API. And currently this JWT token is not passing the request and response to the next filter on the chain. And let me go back to IntelliJ. And what we're going to do here is very simple. So after we finish, what we're going to say is filter, lowercase, so filter chain dot, and then do filter request and then response. And this will make sure that the request and response that we got onto this filter can be passed down onto the next filter in this filter chain. So now let's go ahead and pretty much just stop the application. And what I'm going to do is simply run it normal without debug mode. And there we go. Let me go back to Postman. And now let's go ahead and try and send the exact same request. And ta-da! So you can see that now this time we get the actual resource that we requested from the server. So basically, we've managed to achieve all of this. So this bit where we send a token for each request, we verify the token, and if it's okay, we send the resource, right? Which in our case is this. So this is what we've asked for. We've actually managed to implement JWT with Spring Boot. So this is really awesome. Now let me go ahead and open up the header. And right here, let me simply add, for example, a 1. And then let me send this request. And you can see that it's forbidden. Now, if I open up IntelliJ, you can see that we have an exception. And let's look at the exception. There we go. Illegal state exception. Token 1EY. Cannot be trusted. There you go. So we've managed to successfully implement JWT. So also, if this token is expired, this exception will be thrown. And you can add more information when you throw the exception to have a bit more context of why the token is not valid. So right here, you could add more information from the above token. So there we go. If you have any questions of what we've done so far throughout this entire section, go ahead and drop me a message and I'll be more than happy to further assist you. So next, what I want to do is actually refactor a few things. So you see right here where we have this secret key. So we are actually using this secret key in two places. So also in the JWT username and password authentication filter right here. So next, let's go ahead and create a configuration file that will hold the actual key so that we can reuse it throughout our code base. Catch me on the next one. Alright, let's go ahead and create a class that will hold some configuration for our JWT implementation. So under the JWT package, go ahead and create a new class and call it as JWT and then config. So right here, so this class will be annotated with @ and then configuration and then properties. So right here inside we can pass a prefix. So the prefix, so let's pass a prefix. This will be application dot and then JWT. So what we're going to do now is open up the resources folder, and inside of application.properties. So let's go ahead and create a couple of properties. So right here, let's go ahead and simply say application.jwt and make sure that this is the same as this. So this is the actual prefix. Now right here, we're going to have secret and then key equals to, and remember the secret was, so right here. So let me grab that, Command C, go back to application properties and then paste that. Now let's also have application.jwt and then .token prefix, and this will be equal to and then bearer and then space. So we actually need that space in there, right? So I think we can have a space with a configuration file, but we will find out in a second. And also let's go ahead and say application.jwt and then token expiration and then after, and then this time let's go ahead and change it to days because I think it's easier for you to manage, and let's say 14. And I think this is it. So now let's go ahead and go back to the JWT config, and right here let's go ahead and simply say private and then string, and right here let's go ahead and simply say token, or actually let's grab this, so secret key, there we go. Let's also get the token prefix, so private, oh actually I can duplicate this, so Command D and then Command D, and this will be an integer, and I think I need to grab this as well, go back, paste that, there we go. Now let's go ahead and have a constructor, select none, so we need an empty constructor, and let's also have some getters and setters, there we go. So now everything will be injected into this JWT config. Now there are two things that we need. So right here, so let me go back. So we actually need this key, right? So let me just extract this to a variable so you see exactly. So we have, we need this key right here. So let me just go back and let me Command C on that. And let me go back to the config, and right here let's go ahead and have public and then secret and then key, there we go, and then get and then secret and then key, and let me paste that, and right here what we're going to do is simply say return, and then right here the actual key will be secret key dot get bytes, and that with semicolon. And let me simply rename this for, and then signing. There we go. And we need to annotate this with @ and then bean. And the last thing that we need here is a public and then string and then get authorization and then header. And right here, let's go ahead and simply say return HTTP headers from com.google.net dot and then authorization. And there we go. So now let's go ahead and inject this class and use it. So open up the JWT username and password filter. Let's go ahead and inject two things here. So right here, we're going to say private final and then JWT and then config. And in fact, what I want to do is actually create another class and simply say JWT secret key. And right here, let's go ahead and have this with @ and then configuration. And let's take this method, well, actually from the config. So let's grab this bean right here. So let's take it from here and then add it here, just like that. And let's say private final JWT config, and then we'll inject this at AutoWire and then config dot and then get secret key. There we go. And I think this looks much better. Dot and then get bytes, and right here we can simply say get secret key. And now I can go ahead and open up the actual filter, and we need also to inject the private final and then JWT and then secret key. There we go. And actually basically it's not that, so we need this one right here, right? So we need that, and this will be a secret key. And basically let's just rename this to secret and then key. Now if I go back, I need to AutoWire these guys. So refactor and then add it to a new line there and there. And now we can use it. So right here, we can get rid of that. And we can also get rid of this. And I can simply say secret key. There we go. Now for the authorization, we can use the config. So config, so JWT config dot and then get authorization header. And right here, so we can simply get the actual prefix. So token, or actually config dot and then get token prefix, just like that. If I put this full screen so you can see exactly what we are doing. Now let's go ahead and do the same for the JWT verifier. So right here, private final and then secret key. There we go. And private final JWT config. Let's add to constructor. We're going to fix that in a second. So right here, let's scroll down. So right here, config dot get authorization header. Right here, instead of that, config dot get prefix. And then right here, the same. So config, and you can see that this is much better. Get and then prefix. And right here, we don't need that anymore. And right here, this is just the actual secret key, just like that. And there we go. So now let's go ahead and open up the project tab and open up the application security config, and right here we have some errors, and that's because we need to inject. So let's go ahead and say private final and then secret key and private final and then JWT config, and let's add two constructor parameters, and there we go. So new line there, and you can see that all the errors went away. And basically for these two filters we are passing the config as well as the secret key. So this is pretty much it. Next, let's go ahead and restart the application and make sure that we haven't broken anything. Alright, so let's go ahead and test things out. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and restart the application, and hopefully we should have no errors. And there we go, everything up and running fine. Let's go ahead and open up Postman, and right here let's go ahead and send this same request. So a get, so right here you can see the headers, we have this token, and let me remove this one right here because that's incorrect, and then send, and you can see that it still works. But what I'm going to do also is actually try and get a new token. So right here in the actual body we have Linda, but now let's go ahead and simply say Tom. Let's try with Tom. So we want to get a token for Tom. So let me go ahead and send, and there we go, 200. So let's go to headers, let's grab this token right here without bearer. Let's open up JSON Web Tokens, or actually JWT.io, paste that in, and there we go. So you can see that, so if I take this, so you can see that we have Tom authorities. So Tom has student read, he has a role of admin trainee, and he can only read courses. So let's go ahead and try and send a request to management API, and let's grab this token. Let's go to headers, and actually let me just create a brand new one. So this will be management API headers authorization. There we go, paste the token, and this should be bearer, and then send, and you can see that it works. So if we try to post, so let's try and post someone. So let's go ahead and simply say 3, and then in the body raw, and then application.json. Let's send an empty blob, send, and you can see that the method is not allowed. It's because it doesn't exist. So let me go back to IntelliJ. So right here, so student management controller, and this was a post mapping, and I think we need to pass a student, so student ID, so student ID, that'll be 1, or actually whatever, it doesn't matter. And then we need student name, and actually I don't need this path as well. Send, and you can see that now it's forbidden. So this is actually working. So there we go. I think that having this configuration file for the actual token prefix, and I think we forgot the expiration days after, so let's also fix this. So right here, I think this was under the JWT username and password authentication filter. So right here, So instead of say plus weeks, let's go ahead and delete that and say plus and then days. And right here, let's go ahead and simply say config dot and then get token expiration after days. And there we go. So if I go back to the actual config and let's change this to 10 days, for example. So let's go ahead and restart the server. There we go. Let's issue a new token. So post, and then right here in the body, Tom, send. There we go. Headers. You can see that we have a 200. Let me grab the token here. Go back to JWT.io, paste that in, and then if I take this, now you can see that the issue that was just now, so the 3rd of December, now the expiration date should be on the 13th. And there we go, so 10 days after. And this is pretty much everything about JWTs with Spring Boot. If you have any questions of what we've done in this section, go ahead and drop me a message and I'll be more than happy to assist on whatever question you might have. This is all for this section. I hope you had fun as I did, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya. Alright, so I just want to give you a quick word on JWTs. So you see that they are very, very powerful, right? So when you issue a token, make sure that the token hasn't got a long expiration date. So make it something like, I don't know, maybe 10 days or 7 days, because you want your users to authenticate to your system as much as possible. Also, you see that a user can request for as many tokens as it wants. So currently, the best way for fixing this is to actually store some of those tokens or the information about a user and token to a database. So if the user requests for another token, you can invalidate pre-existing ones. So this is something that you should bear in mind when using JWTs. If you have any questions on JWTs, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, next, let's go ahead and wrap things up. All right, fellow amigo coder. So we actually reached the end of this course. And as you saw, Spring Security is amazing. It simplifies a lot of security concepts into an abstracted way, and pretty much we just use this awesome API to secure our applications. So if you have any questions on anything that we've done here, go ahead and drop me a message. And if you want to learn how to connect to a real database, because that's what you are missing now, go ahead and check my full stack web development with Spring Boot and React. And once you learn everything, so security plus Spring Boot, how to connect to a database, how to build a front end, then you pretty much have, the skills necessary to build a full app on your own. So this is all for now. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe, because you mean a lot to me, and your support drives me to build more and more content like this. Visit my website for any other courses, and this is all for now. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.